If you've ever wondered why certain people drain you, confuse you, or always seem to benefit when you lose, it's usually because they're running manipulations you don't see yet. The truth is, manipulators blend in better than ever, because most people are too polite, too trusting, or too distracted to notice. But Machiavelli understood something timeless. If you want to know who someone really is, you don't wait for them to confess. You make the environment reveal them. Today, you're about to learn 7 Machiavellian tactics that expose hidden manipulators instantly, and the last one is the most uncomfortable because it removes every mask they have. The first tactic works because it hits manipulators right where they're weakest, their need for predictability. Manipulators don't improvise well. They build their entire strategy on studying your habits, your timing, your tone, and your emotional patterns. They rely on the fact that you respond the same way every time, because that lets them plan exactly how to steer you. So when you suddenly break your own pattern, it's like pulling the rug out from under their entire operation. You don't have to do anything dramatic. You just shift something small. Maybe you answer slower than usual, or you don't jump to explain yourself like you normally do. Or you show a little less enthusiasm. You stop giving them the reactions they've memorized, and in that moment, they reveal themselves. A genuine person simply adjusts and keeps moving. They don't take it personally, and they certainly don't panic. But a manipulator instantly feels the glitch. They sense that the control they had over you is slipping, and you can see the tension crack through their behavior. They might question you out of nowhere. They might demand explanations. They might try to re-engage you with guilt, pressure, or sudden urgency. They try to force you back into the version of yourself that was easier to influence. This is exactly what Machiavelli understood centuries ago when he wrote about unpredictability as a ruler's weapon. He knew that when you disrupt the expected rhythm, people stop acting and start reacting, and their reactions tell you everything. What makes this tactic so effective is how subtle it can be. You don't need a confrontation. You don't need a speech. You don't need to accuse anyone. You simply change your tempo, and the people who are counting on your predictability start slipping. You get to watch who becomes uncomfortable, who becomes controlling, and who suddenly seems frustrated that they can't read you anymore. A manipulator cannot operate without a stable pattern to exploit. Take that pattern away, and their true intentions start spilling out faster than they can hide them. The second tactic is strategic silence, and it works because manipulators need noise to survive. They need your quick replies, your explanations, your emotional reactions, your attempts to clarify, your need to smooth things over. That constant flow of energy is their fuel. It's what lets them steer conversations, twist narratives, and pull you into emotional loops you didn't sign up for. So when you take that fuel away, even for a moment, you create a vacuum they can't handle. Silence is not passive here. It's a calculated move that forces them to operate without your cooperation, and that's when they start revealing their real agenda. When you stop reacting instantly, something shifts. You let their message sit. You don't rush to fix the tension. You don't scramble to defend yourself. You simply stay still. A healthy person interprets silence as space. They assume you're thinking, busy, or not in the mood to talk. They remain calm, but a manipulator experiences silence as an attack. They start panicking because silence means they can't guide your emotions. They don't know what you're thinking, which means they can't predict your next move. And uncertainty is their worst nightmare. Watch what they do next, because their reaction is the reveal. Some manipulators double text or escalate quickly, trying to pull you back into their rhythm. Others over-explain themselves, dumping unnecessary details in a rush to regain control of the narrative. Some go passive-aggressive, tossing little hooks like, "I guess you don't care," hoping you'll bite emotionally. Others suddenly shift into guilt, urgency, or pressure, all designed to break your silence so they can start guiding you again. Machiavelli understood this long before messaging apps existed. He wrote about how silence forces people to show their intentions because they can't stand the empty space. They feel compelled to fill it, and in the process, they expose what they were planning to do with you all along. Strategic silence isn't about ignoring someone. It's about creating a moment where their behavior becomes transparent. In that quiet pause, you see who needs to control you and who's comfortable. Letting you breathe, that difference tells you everything. The third tactic is controlled vulnerability, and this one is a psychological trap disguised as honesty. Manipulators love information. They collect it the way a strategist collects leverage, storing it for the moment they can use it against you. What they hate, what they absolutely cannot handle, is a piece of information that looks valuable, but isn't. That's why controlled vulnerability works so powerfully. You give them something small, harmless, and slightly personal, just enough for them to believe they've gained access to your inner world, but not enough to actually harm you. Then you watch how they handle it. A genuine person treats this moment with respect. They listen, they empathize. They may even forget about it entirely because they aren't thinking politically. But a manipulator responds differently. They lean forward. They mentally bookmark it. You can feel their curiosity sharpen because they believe they've discovered a soft spot. They treat your harmless vulnerability like a key to your mind, not realizing the door it opens is one you built on purpose. The reaction happens slowly at first. They might bring up your vulnerability in a later conversation, just to test your emotional reaction. They might hint at it in a subtle way to see how easily you can be swayed. They might even try to weaponize it outright, using your small confession to guilt you, pressure you, or redirect you. And in doing so, they expose exactly who they are. They reveal that they weren't listening to understand. They were listening to gain advantage. Machiavelli understood this dynamic perfectly. He knew that when people think they have access to your weakness, they reveal their intentions much faster. Controlled vulnerability is your way of letting them feel powerful while you study what they do with that power. If they twist it, exaggerate it, or hold it over your head, even subtly, you've caught a manipulator red-handed. If they handle it with care and respect, you've confirmed someone who isn't trying to exploit you. This tactic is masterful because it requires almost no effort on your part. You're not confronting anyone. You're not calling anyone out. You're simply offering a tiny piece of personal information and observing who treats it as a weapon instead of a bond. And the moment they show their hand, you finally see the truth. The person who rushes to use your vulnerability is the one you should never trust. The fourth tactic is selective ignorance, and this one is pure psychological chess. Manipulators thrive on the belief that they're always one step ahead of you. They think they're sharper, more aware, and more in control than you are. So when you pretend not to notice something they expected you to catch, you trigger one of the most revealing dynamics in human behavior. You make them believe you're in the dark, and that false sense of advantage makes them expose what they were hiding. The move itself is simple. They say something with a hidden meaning, and you act like you took it literally. They drop a subtle dig, and you pretend you didn't catch the tone. They give you a half-truth, and you behave like you bought the whole story. The key is not showing any sign of suspicion. You give them the illusion that whatever angle they're quietly working is invisible to you, and once they believe that, they get bold. A genuine person won't push further. If anything, they might clarify themselves or drop the topic altogether because they weren't trying to manipulate you in the first place. But a manipulator cannot resist the opportunity. They start layering extra details. They start guiding you toward a conclusion that benefits them. They exaggerate. They over-explain. They repeat the lie, but with more enthusiasm. In their excitement to take advantage of your supposed ignorance, they reveal their entire plan. This is exactly what Machiavelli understood about human nature. People expose their intentions fastest when they believe they're succeeding. When they think they have you fooled, they get sloppy. They stop hiding. They reveal the pressure they're trying to apply. They show the outcome they're forcing you toward. They expose who they're trying to turn you against, what advantage they're trying to gain, or what narrative they're trying to build. Selective ignorance lets you watch all of this without lifting a finger. You're not confronting them. You're not questioning them. You're not accusing them. You're just letting them perform while you observe. And the beauty of this tactic is that once someone shows you how they act when they think you're unaware, you never have to wonder again. You've seen their raw intentions with no filter, no disguise, and no excuses. Hidden manipulators always reveal themselves when they think they're winning. And selective ignorance is how you let them win just long enough to show their true face. The fifth tactic is contradiction testing, and this is where manipulators start to crumble under the weight of their own stories. Manipulators rely on shaky narratives, half-truths, and emotional shortcuts to keep you confused. Their version of events is rarely stable. It shifts, depending on what benefits them in the moment. That's why contradiction testing works so effectively. You're not calling them out. You're not accusing them. You're simply placing a past detail in a new context and watching what happens when their old script collides with their new goal. You might casually bring up something they said earlier, but with slightly different wording, just enough to change the angle. Or you mention a detail they probably didn't expect you to remember. Or you ask a simple, innocent question that forces them to revisit a part of their own story. And then you watch their reaction. A genuine person responds naturally and consistently because they're telling the truth. They might clarify or explain something you misunderstood, but they stay steady. A manipulator, though, starts slipping almost immediately. The signs show fast. They might hesitate for a second longer than normal. Their tone might shift. They might try to reshape the memory right in front of you, as if the original version never existed. Some manipulators double down on their invented story and accidentally make it even weaker. Others panic and try to distract you by changing the subject, adding unnecessary drama, or shifting the blame onto someone else. They twist the narrative so hard you can practically see the cracks forming. This tactic works because manipulators rarely remember their own lies perfectly. They rely on your emotional reactions to drown out the logic. When you remove the emotional noise and subtly place the spotlight back on the details, you force them to rely on accuracy instead of manipulation, and they can't do it. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He knew that liars eventually collide with themselves because every untruth demands maintenance, and most people don't have the mental discipline to keep their stories perfect. perfectly aligned. Contradiction testing doesn't just reveal the lie, it reveals the liar. You see who gets irritated when you ask a simple question. You see who becomes defensive over harmless clarifications. You see who rewrites history with perfect confidence, expecting you to forget the original version. You see the person who gets angry because you remembered something they hoped you wouldn't. You're not being confrontational. You're not being aggressive. You're just letting time expose the inconsistency, and once you see their story bend, twist, or crumble under a basic revisit, you know exactly who you're dealing with. Manipulators depend on you forgetting. Contradiction testing is how you show them you don't. The sixth tactic is the bait-and-watch method, and this one is pure Machiavellian brilliance. It's the tactic that exposes not just a single manipulator, but the entire invisible network around them. Manipulators never work alone. Even if they're not consciously teaming up with others, they rely on the social environment to carry their narratives, their exaggerations, their secrets, and their distortions. So the moment you give them a small, harmless piece of information that sounds important, you hand them the perfect opportunity to reveal who they really are when they think they have something valuable in their hands. The beauty of this tactic is how simple it is. You drop a controlled detail, not something dangerous, not something private, just something that feels like it has weight. It might be a minor plan, a harmless preference, a subtle frustration, anything that looks tempting enough to pass along but won't affect you if it spreads. Then you sit back and watch. You don't follow up. You don't remind them. You don't hint at anything. You just wait. A genuine person receives the information and moves on. They don't spread it. They don't exaggerate it. They don't use it as leverage. They don't suddenly treat you differently. But a manipulator, they cannot resist the bait. They feel the thrill of having what they think is inside knowledge. They start sharing it, testing it, twisting it, using it as social currency. Sometimes they leak it quietly to see who reacts. Sometimes they embellish it to make themselves look more connected. Sometimes they weaponize it to create tension around you. And in doing any of that, they expose themselves completely. What makes this even more revealing is that the information always finds its way back to you. It comes echoed through someone else's words, distorted, exaggerated, or repackaged into a version you never said. When that happens, you instantly see who carried it, who amplified it, and who added their own spin. This is how you uncover not just the manipulator, but the chain of people who willingly or subconsciously participate in their behavior. Machiavelli relied on this exact strategy when navigating courts filled with whispers, alliances, and hidden agendas. He knew that people show who they are when they're given something they believe is powerful. The bait-and-watch method reveals ambition, insecurity, jealousy, loyalty, and betrayal without a single confrontation. You simply give them the illusion of advantage and see how far they run with it. And once you see where the information travels and how fast, you've mapped out the entire landscape around you. You know who talks, you know who twists, you know who listens, you know who watches quietly. Most importantly, you know who cannot be trusted with anything real. With one tiny piece of controlled data, the masks fall off, and everyone's role becomes obvious. The seventh tactic is emotional neutrality, and this is the one manipulators absolutely cannot survive. Every manipulator, no matter how subtle or polished, relies on one thing above all: your emotional reactions. They don't need you to explode or break down. They just need you to respond predictably. Maybe you get anxious when they withdraw. Maybe you feel guilty when they're disappointed. Maybe you rush to fix things when they act offended. Maybe you feel flattered when they praise you. Whatever it is, they study it. They feed on it. They build their entire playbook around it. So when you suddenly become emotionally neutral, no spikes, no drops, no visible reactions whatsoever, you strip away every tool they have. Emotional neutrality doesn't mean coldness. It means composure. It's a state where you respond calmly, plainly, and without giving them anything they can use to guide you. You don't reward their guilt trips. You don't react to their subtle jabs. You don't mirror their dramatics. You don't rise when they try to provoke you. You stay steady, grounded, almost unreadable. And that unreadability is what terrifies a manipulator. They cannot influence someone they cannot predict. They cannot twist someone they cannot emotionally push. They cannot control someone who won't give them a foothold. Watch what happens when you become neutral. A genuine person barely reacts. They might notice the calmness and appreciate it. They may even match your tone. They don't need your emotional turbulence to feel connected, so your stability doesn't threaten them. A manipulator, though, begins to crack almost immediately. They might escalate, adding more intensity to force a reaction out of you. They might suddenly shift strategies, trying sweetness, guilt, anger, charm, or confusion, anything to break your calm surface. They might accuse you of being distant or cold because your neutrality prevents them from steering the conversation. Or they might retreat entirely, not because they're respecting your space, but because they can't operate without emotional leverage. This is where Machiavelli's insight becomes crystal clear. The calmest person in the room holds the most power. Emotional neutrality is not a defense. It's dominance. It's the moment you stop playing the game they've been orchestrating and force them to face the reality that their methods don't work on you anymore. And when their methods fail, manipulators reveal their real personality: impatient, irritated, frustrated, suspicious. You watch the facade peel back as they lose control of the dynamic they once managed so easily. The beauty of this tactic is that it doesn't require confrontation or conflict. You don't have to expose them directly. You don't have to outthink them or out-argue them. You simply stop feeding them emotionally, and their entire strategy collapses. Emotional neutrality dissolves manipulation by removing the fuel it depends on. And once you become someone whose emotions cannot be pulled, pushed, or shaped on command, manipulators can't hide around you. They have no choice but to reveal who they really are. Now that you know all 7 tactics, here's the truth most people never fully grasp. Manipulators thrive in shadows, in ambiguity, in your emotional reactions. They only survive when you give them the cues they need to steer, control, or exploit you. But once you start using these methods, breaking patterns, using silence, testing contradictions, dropping controlled information, staying emotionally neutral, you stop playing by their rules. You force them to operate in the open. You force them to show their intentions. And once you see them clearly, the power dynamic shifts instantly. Remember, manipulators live in the blind spots of ordinary perception. These 7 tactics are your way of illuminating every corner. Use them wisely, observe carefully, and you'll never be blindsided the same way again. Once you see the game, you can choose whether to play it or walk away entirely with your power intact.